Hey everybody, welcome back for another recap of Odysseus, or the Odyssey, excuse me. So book 16 is what we're on today. In book 16, right, we finally get that reunion of Odysseus and Telemachus. Though, at first, right, Telemachus sees him as a stranger, and, essentially does not recognize him, right? And again, it's the power of Athena and the gases where they can just touch a wand and voila, we don't recognize who you are, even though it's his father, right? And so, the issue that we see in 16 is a few things, right? One is going to be, how are they going to go about this? And Eumaeus basically asks Telemachus to take the stranger to the palace, and Telemachus is like, no, this is not a good idea. If it's about money or cost, we'll supply all the food and clothes, but it's not a good time to bring another stranger into the house with all the suitors. And so when Eumaeus leaves, right, to go do some work, this is where Athena goes to Odysseus, like, now's the time, right? So you got to start planning how you're going to get the suitors out of here. And so this is where Telemachus sees Odysseus, and at first he thinks it's maybe a trick of the gods, right? Because the gods can turn into anything or anyone, and so he's not trusting that this is Odysseus. But when he finally does, right, lots of tears, lots of joy, but also stress, right? Because basically now they have to figure out how to get it back. Because at this point, a couple things, right? One, yeah, if Odysseus came back, it'd be an issue, but there are so many suitors, right, that they're too invested now that even if Odysseus came back and said, this is my palace, there's going to be some kind of uprising, right? And so now the plan is to figure out how to get rid of these guys and Telemachus. Like, there's so many. And this is where we start to learn, some of their names a little bit, right? Not all of them, but he does kind of talk about how there's, dozens of people that they might consider to be quote-unquote suitors. The biggest ones they talk about in this book was Eurymachus, right, son of Polybus, and then Amphinomus, right, and Amphinomus is more of a level-headed kind of rational suitor who understands the legacy of the family and also doesn't necessarily want to have blood in his hands. On the other side of it, Eurymachus, and a lot of the other suitors want to kill Telemachus, right? Telemachus is standing in their way of taking over Ithaca. And so, their suitors are playing it. But then, right, Amphinomus, who is more level-headed, was like, listen, if Zeus doesn't want this, this could be very bad, right? So if Zeus okays us killing Telemachus, I'll be the first to try to kill him. But we have to make that very clear, right? Because it could go very poorly. What we see as Odysseus and Telemachus are kind of planning their next moves, which is going to be Odysseus still being in disguise as an old beggar, is that we get to see Penelope show her anger, right? And before she sees Telemachus, right, she goes and tells the suitors that, I know that you're trying to plan on killing my son, and how dare you, and you cannot kill my son, you have to promise me not to kill my son. And they give her some reassurance that wouldn't happen, but at the same time, that's all they've talked about in this chapter. So as you can see, we're getting to that climax of the story, that this fight that's going to happen between Telemachus and Odysseus, and what they think is Zeus and Athena, right, as well, is going to help, right? That Zeus isn't going to allow them to lose their land. And so, but they have to plan, right? And this is going to be a fight, right? These are their enemies, and they need them to be gone, right? And remember, the suitors, right, were waiting for Telemachus. Their goal was to intercept and kill him before he got back to Ithaca. And again, if the gods want something to happen, it will happen. So they didn't want Telemachus killed, right? So he gets back to Ithaca. And so now they have to figure out how they're going to go about this. And again, nobody knows, except for Telemachus, right, that Odysseus is back and alive. And so now they have to figure out a plan. And so it's getting a little bit more complicated. We're introduced to a few more people. right? And so, we're moving to more action, right? Things are finally happening. Remember, I mean, we're 16 books, 16 chapters, into this book. And the goal of the book when we start off is Odysseus coming back to Ithaca and taking back his crown, right? His rule. But it's taken 15 chapters to get to a point where they can plan kind of their attack. And we've learned so much, right? Whether it's Greek mythology, or we learned about Odysseus' struggles right after the war, right? And what we're seeing and what we've learned, right, is Odysseus is resilient. He makes mistakes. He's human, right? And I think the big thing in this book is that when you talk about the humans in this book, you have to talk about their flaws in order to separate themselves from the gods, right? That Odysseus, even though he's a hero and he's strong and resilient and has lasted and is still alive, is still human and has still made many mistakes that has led him to this point. And the goal, though, that he's always had is to be back with his wife and his son, and to live happily in Ithaca. And so we're getting close to that climax of him taking that back after all of this time. Right, so lots of action kind of looking to be happening in the next few books. And that's really the gist of book 16. Again, not super complicated, but what we do see, right, is we're being introduced to more people, and they're going to kind of get to see this. In book 17, right, we're going to see Odysseus back in disguise and going into town. Hope everybody's doing well. I'll talk to you soon.